Hello and welcome to the Stormont Sources podcast, where we take you inside politics at Stormont and inside policy making for Northern Ireland. I'm David McCann, and on the podcast is Tim Kearns, former Special Advisor to Peter Robinson and Head of Policy for the DUP. Hello, Tim.
Hi, David.
And we also have another regular, Michael McKernan, who was a former Special Advisor to the SDLP. He was in the executive from 2007 to 2016. Hello, Michael.
Hello, David. Hello, Tim.
On the podcast today, we are going to be talking with the Minister for the Economy, Caoimhe Archibald, about what does success look like for Sinn Féin by 2027 and the myriad of different issues that confront the Economy Department. Also, we're going to be looking at the recent Lucid Talk poll and seeing who's up, who's down, as we are now within 2 years of the next Assembly election. You can watch it all on YouTube. Search for Stormont Sources, where we upload clips and full episodes for you to enjoy. Head to YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel for videos and updates. You can follow us on X, watch clips on TikTok and Instagram, and you can subscribe to our mailing list at stormontsources.com. We also love to get your feedback on what we're saying. You can WhatsApp us at 0333 404 6507. Make sure you use the word Stormont. You can also send us an email, hello@stormontsources.com. We read them all. And we are now delighted to be joined by the Minister for the Economy, Caoimhe Archibald. Caoimhe, you're very welcome to Stormont Sources.
Thank you.
Caoimhe, so obviously we are, not to give you palpitations, but we're within striking distance, within 2 years of the next Assembly election. So I'm just wondering, you could be out of that department in 2 years from now, right? So I'm wondering, if you are out of the department, what does success look like for you? What are you looking to take to the next Assembly elections as this is what I have delivered in this department over the last 2 and a bit years?
So when we came into this department, and you will know that this was a department that we wanted to take, we knew we wanted to take it within this mandate, and myself and Conor Murphy had done a lot of engagement and planning to take on this department. What we wanted to bring was a clear strategic direction to the department. So we have an economic vision with 4 priorities underneath that in terms of creating more good jobs, improving productivity, improving regional balance, and decarbonisation of our economy. So that's guiding everything that we do. And under each of those priorities, we have a number of actions. And I guess that's where we come to when we talk about what we want to achieve in the rest of this mandate, but also in terms of setting the direction of travel going forward, because some of the challenges that we face in respect of our economy, the likes of regional imbalance, the ongoing productivity challenges that we have, they are deeply embedded, and they are going to take time to turn those things around and to see real progress. So shifting the dial in terms of the metrics, that's going to be more challenging, that will take longer. So it's about the actions that we're taking in the immediacy and in the medium term to try and to achieve that. And for me as well, it's a bit about perceptions. So, you know, people in my neck of the woods and west of the Ban will often remark about the regional imbalance and about the underinvestment. And what we're trying to do is to take actions to address that perception, but also the reality as well. And so I suppose in terms of what I want to achieve in the rest of this mandate, under each of those priorities, good jobs, for example, we have announced our proposals in relation to the Good Jobs Bill. I'm sure we'll come on and talk about that maybe in a bit more detail. So that to me is key. One of the key things that I want to achieve in this mandate is the passing of that legislation, because that's going to make a real difference to people's lives. Regional balance, and then we have established the local economic partnerships. That's given power back to local areas to set their own economic priorities, and to begin to drive things forward from a local perspective. And then under each of the others, there are also actions that we are taking to try and to move the dial in relation to those priorities as well.
And Caoimhe, just obviously, because you've mentioned there about regional balance, and you're right, this is something that has plagued particularly the nationalist parties in the executive. There has been that perception that since 1999, whether it's been the SDLP or whether it's been yourselves, that regional balance has not been corrected, particularly up in, as you were saying, your neck of the woods, I know East Area, and then obviously on the Foyle. Resources are tight. How do you actually get that development of things like McGee. You talked about the economic partnerships with councils up there, but with tight finances, Kiva, is it realistic that we're going to see much progress in the next 2 years on that?
So in relation to the McGee expansion, that's a programme for government commitment. It's a decade new approach commitment. It's something that I personally am passionate about delivering on. And so in terms of us as an executive, but also departmentally setting our priorities, we have a programme for government now. We have to try and align our budget to deliver on those priorities. And within each of our departments, where we have priorities, we have to align our budgets to deliver those. So that's what we have done within the Department for Economy, Connor previously, and now myself, in relation to directing our resources to deliver against our priorities, as well as delivering against everything else that we have to do within the department. So we have ensured that budget is directed, for example, towards McGee expansion, towards the local economic partnerships, towards delivering on our energy and productivity priorities as well, in terms of particular schemes in each of those areas to help with the delivery of what we're trying to achieve there. So it is about what is often termed as making the difficult decisions. That means you have to try and direct your resources to where they're going to have the most impact, but also to try and to deliver on what we have set as our own priorities and what the executive has agreed as its priorities.
And Kiva, just before I go over to Tim there, just interesting enough, because obviously this is the first time that your party has occupied that department. I mean, in terms of there is the perception out west that there is almost like an official, not an official level, but that there is a hesitancy towards investing in the West. In your 5 months in that department, have you picked that up at all? That there's maybe a Belfast-centric focus over the ignoring the West?
So you're quite right. That would have been a perception, certainly from constituencies like my own. It would have been a perception that was reflected in the review of Invest NI in respect of its investment previously. And I have to say, what I have found within the department is people who are willing to work with me. And within Invest NI as well, that is the case. So the Invest NI business plan aligns with the Department for Economy's economic vision. They have a target of delivering 65% of investment outside of the Greater Belfast area as part of delivering on the regional balance priority. So certainly, I think with the strategic direction that we have brought to the department, that is guiding everything that we are trying to achieve and what the department is trying to deliver. And I can say that my officials are working with me in trying to achieve that.
Well, talking about Invest NI, just for a second, it does feel like, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but certainly it feels, and there's a perception that Invest NI is not doing as good a job now as maybe what it was doing 10 or 15 years ago. And if we compare ourselves to down south or other parts of the United Kingdom, it does seem like Invest NI is not delivering the amount of jobs, is not delivering the amount of foreign direct investment that it once did. Why is that? Why does it feel like Invest NI, we're not getting the job announcements, the big American money that we seem to get in the past?
And I think part of that, and again, was reflected in the review of Invest NI that was conducted a couple of years ago, was what was Invest NI's purpose and target. And it was very much about job creation, but job creation in itself doesn't necessarily deliver in terms of the kind of economic metrics that we need to see shifting. And so the focus that we are now bringing is in terms of productivity. And that is where the efforts of Invest in terms of their support schemes and other efforts is going towards trying to shift that dial. And in respect of FDI, I think that certainly we still are performing well there. But the FDI can't just be an aim in and of itself to get foreign direct investment in. It has to align with what our economic objectives are, because if we are just bringing more companies in particular sectors and more jobs, then what we're doing is we're creating labour challenges for companies who are already here, and that is something that has been highlighted as a challenge. Clearly, we are all aware of the challenges that we face in respect of labour and skills, and that is another real priority for the department, is trying to ensure that we have that pipeline of skilled people to fill the type of roles that are being created. So it is very much about trying to ensure that what we are bringing in terms of foreign direct investment or jobs that are being created through foreign direct investment is adding to what is here, not displacing roles that are here and people in roles that are already here. So it is about having that kind of cohesive approach to what we're trying to achieve, both from Invest and the department.
But if our universities are saying that they're underfunded and they need a huge injection of funding, how are we going to bridge that skills gap if we aren't investing in our universities?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the conversation, I suppose, that we have about the broader fiscal challenges that we face and the work that we have been doing over the past couple of years in relation to making the case about being funded to our level of need, which for me is only one part of the argument in relation to our finances, because we need to see proper investment from the British government into public services, or even if we're getting our level of need, that's not going to be enough to deliver the type of public services that people want and deserve. So that is a piece of work that continues under now John O'Dowd in the finance department. But as an executive, we have to try and direct our resources according to our priorities within the programme for government. And as I said, we're trying to do that in the department as well. But there is no doubt, absolutely no doubt, that we are very challenged in terms of our finances. And that goes across all areas of the department. We and myself, since I have come into this role, have tried as much as possible to direct the resources towards our priorities, and skills is, for me, critical to delivering on all of the objectives that we're trying to achieve. And so I am trying to ensure that we are putting as much resource as we possibly can towards that. So I have said very publicly that I want to continue to work with our universities and colleges and everybody in that sector to try to find a way to ensure that it is fairly and sustainably resourced. But that's a work in progress, and something that I will have to continue over the rest of this mandate. We have facing some particular challenges in this financial year that I will have to work with executive colleagues to try to address. But I am absolutely committed to doing that.
Shouldn't we just raise tuition fees? Would not be the first step? I mean, there doesn't seem any logical reason for us to take a hit in our block grant for universities to be underfunded when we could just move tuition fees up to whatever, 9,000, 9,500, whatever they are, in other parts of the United Kingdom.
Ouch.
And I would always reflect that we, as a devolved institution, have the ability to set our own policy objectives, but we don't have the fiscal levers that allows us to make to be fully autonomous in making those decisions. So in many respects, things are imposed upon us, whether it's in relation to tuition fees or other policies that wouldn't be the choice of parties here in terms of what they are trying to do.
But tuition fees was the choice of parties here. So parties here have chosen to have tuition fees that are lesser than what the tuition fees are in other parts of the UK. Yeah. And so that is a choice. But so you could make another choice and say, well, look, because we're underfunded, because we need to have funding, it'd be better just to lift that floor in the tuition fees, and then better fund our universities, better fund skills, and be able to attract better jobs.
And I think, again, it's what the executive has tried to do with a number of different policies that have been imposed by the British government is we've tried to mitigate against them. That has created its own challenges for us financially. From my perspective, putting that burden onto students isn't something that I think is a wise thing to do, or isn't a fair thing to do. And my party's position is that in the rest of the island is that we are trying to remove student fees and invest in publicly funded higher education. That's the perspective that obviously that I would like to be able to deliver here too. But the financial reality doesn't match with what we are trying to achieve, and so it is a case of trying to mitigate that as best as possible. That's the difficulty, I suppose, in our constitutional arrangements that we do have. But I think as an executive, we are clearly trying to manage the resources that we have and prioritise them as best as we possibly can. And that is not an easy thing to do. I think as well, in terms of the need to address our skills challenges, there are many ways that we can do that in a kind of collaborative way across the whole further and higher education landscape, and that's something that I want to take a further look at. We have committed to doing a review of higher education funding. We are looking at our further education delivery as well. And I think there is opportunities there for more cohesion across that entire system that would be delivering better for people here, and trying to ensure that we have opportunities for young people to stay here and to be able to get access to the best possible training and education to give them the opportunities that they deserve.
Just one more thing. I just want to touch very briefly on tourism. But it feels to me, and other people have said this to me as well, if you go back 10, 15 years ago, it feels like we had a lot more big events, a lot more things that were happening. The Giro d'Italia with the ice skating, crashed ice at Stormont. We had the planes, the Red Bull planes came, and we have the Open Golf.
This is all your greatest hits, Tim, by the way.
We've
yet to get the Eurovision.
And also the European Music Awards, Michael. I know you're into your music. Michael knows all about 1970s punk. But we also had the European Music Awards. It just feels like we don't have those events anymore. And I think there's a concern just about the Open Championship. It makes 100 million, 150 million, depending on what estimates you go by for the economy here in Northern Ireland. And we've only got one more go after this one at the Open, and we're not. We are kind of on that rotation. But Portmarnock's now coming into the mix to try and replace Portrush potentially. The Irish government have said they'll back Portmarnock. I suppose it's a double question, really. Why do we not have those big events anymore? And why are we not trying to seek the Giro d'Italia, the Tour de France, or any of those events to come and build on that legacy? And what are we doing about the golf? Are we going to make sure that we stay on the Open rotation and that money's delivered here and doesn't go down the road to Portmarnock?
Yeah, well, I think the Open coming back to Portrush this year, and that's my own constituency. So I think it's a great opportunity again to showcase everything that is good about our region, and like our amazing landscape and our amazing golf courses. And we know that really does attract a particular section of international visitors, but also opens up that shines a spotlight, I suppose, on us as a region to attract other international visitors. And we are working very closely with both Tourism NI and Tourism Ireland to absolutely maximise the exposure that we are getting and the opportunities that brings when the golf comes back here. And certainly, I think the conversations that will need to happen to ensure that Royal Portrush remains on the Open's radar and future championships to come back, those will have to continue to happen. Certainly something I would be keen to support, because I think the economic impact, as you have referred to, is so beneficial. And I think the experience of the previous Open, that has benefited greatly in the preparation for this Open. So I think that the offering that we will provide this time will be enhanced to what it was in the past. And I am already hearing this locally about, the more opportunities that there are for local businesses to have the ability to benefit and to be part of that supply chain as well is something that I think is important. So I think there is a lot of benefit to be had from those big types of events, and certainly something that I'm keen to support our tourism organisations in terms of attracting. I think obviously the not having the Euros is a big loss to us. It would have been a huge opportunity, and I think we need to ensure that that we are in a place to deliver on those type of opportunities in the future, and the delivery of Casement Park will be crucial in terms of that type of event. But I think there are opportunities where we have seen the two island approach of attracting these big international events is one that I think that there is further opportunity from as well, and I would be keen to explore also.
So you're going to outbid Dublin if they try to come in and muscle in the Open. We're going to ensure Royal Portrush gets it, and not Portmarnock.
Well, as a local, what's the word I'm looking for here? Well, the local benefit I would like to maintain in our local area, shall we say?
Okay.
Very good, yeah.
Okay, yippee.
Thanks, Michael.
Yippee, more golf. Okay,
That's
Michael.
what we need to do is get David up to Portrush this summer and
Yeah.
get him out to see the golf, because David doesn't understand just how good golf is.
Yeah, great. Well, sure, you.
And the courses that we have, like we hear that all the time. They're second to none. They're some of the best in the world.
Right. I'll take your word for it, Caoimhe. Michael, go on ahead.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've two fine golf courses here in Lurgan, which of course is which of course is the home of the All Ireland champions and the GAA capital of Northern Ireland. But anyhow, you're very welcome, Minister. Very welcome, all the Stormont sources. I've a particular interest in energy. I just stepped down from the board of Mutual Energy there after 6 years. I was delighted to see that among your four priorities and your predecessor's four priorities, we have decarbonisation. And at the heart of that, there's a strategy from 2021, and there's some critical targets. The headline targets are we're going to achieve 80% of electricity generated from renewable sources by 2030. We're going to have a 70% reduction in energy emissions by 2030 as well. We're nowhere near achieving those targets. Not your fault, not Conor Murphy's fault. Energy moves very slowly, and we're indexing a lot of this against 1990 levels. But what can be done to try and get us back on track towards those targets? I think, if we were honest, we're not going to hit them. But what can we do to try and make a better fist of it?
Yeah, and you're right. Decarbonisation is a really crucial priority from my perspective. Energy is a really important policy area. It's one that there's a lot of activity currently in the department in terms of moving forward policy development to try to achieve those targets. They're statutory targets, so we're obligated to deliver them. And it will be a challenge. I don't think anybody would demur from that. In terms of what is required to deliver on, for example, the 80% target. And I suppose it's fair to say that even though that the legislative responsibility for the target sits with the Department for Economy, we do have other departments that will have a crucial role to play in terms of helping us to achieve that, not least, of course, in terms of the type of planning consents that are going to be required to deliver on the renewable projects. So that's something that clearly we're working on a cross-departmental basis. And in terms of the policy development, onshore wind is obviously really important in terms of being the most developed renewable technology that we are currently able to avail of. But there is policy development in, for example, the areas of biomethane, hydrogen. We are looking at a whole range of ways to help us achieve our targets going forward. But that work, I think it's fair to say also that there's a lot of things happening in parallel right now that will, in a couple of years' time, bear fruit in terms of ensuring that we are on the pathway to hitting those targets.
Yeah, I personally don't think it's possible to hit them. Onshore wind is the one success story in the renewable energy mix. We have lots of it. We have lots of capacity, and that's been done well. The only problem is that we're now constrained in the use of it. Like in December 2024, I think 40% of renewable energy that was available, in other words, power available to use, couldn't be used because it was constrained off the system because the network couldn't handle it. So huge investments required in the network, and that takes years. 2030 in energy terms is a bat of an eye away, really. When you guys come back from the summer, you'll have 3 years. It's or 4 years. Sorry, it'll be really challenging. But when I look at the different sectors, biomethane, geothermal, hydrogen, offshore wind, solar, storage, not a lot of progress. It takes years to turn these things around. Shouldn't we be beyond policy development and actually the department setting up schemes and the regulators setting up regulatory frameworks to get these things moving?
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you in that. I think that it's important that the policy development work is done well and that we do have the appropriate regulatory frameworks. And as I said, a lot of that work is going on right now in terms of getting those things moving forward. We will later this year actually hopefully in the next couple of months, have the renewable the renewable electricity price guarantee, the renewable energy price guarantee in place, or they bring in the legislation before the Assembly to get that in place, because that's going to be, I suppose, key in terms of delivering on the type of renewable technology that we're going to need to see onboarded. But I think you're also quite right to reflect on the type of infrastructure that we're going to need to support that. The grid development is going to be really, really crucial, and the work being undertaken by NIE as part of RP7 is going to be really important in helping us to achieve those targets as well. I think there's no getting away from the fact that dispatch down, as we're talking about, is not where we would want to be. Clearly, it's a feature of every electricity system, but our levels have been much higher than what we would wish. And we are engaging, obviously, with Sony, with NIE, with the utility regulator, in respect of all of that. But I think that there's a lot of work to do. A lot of work is happening, and hopefully in a couple of years' time, all of that is going to bear fruit. And you've mentioned yourself a couple of different policy areas where there is activity. The offshore renewable energy action plan, that's out for the strategic environmental assessment currently, and again, that's going to be really key in terms of moving that along. But yes, this is an area of work for the department that is really, really important, not just because we want to do it, but because we're obligated to do it in terms of our climate obligations. But there's a moral imperative to this as well, in terms of leaving the planet in a fit state for future generations, but also for citizens here and now, in terms of ensuring that they have affordable energy in the medium term. And that is one of the things, I suppose, that is driving us in respect of moving this forward as well.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt the moral case, nor indeed the policy intent, but it's actually getting stuff on the ground. You take offshore wind, we're unlikely to have any of it by 2030 actually up and running, whereas the Republic is targeting something like 8 gigawatts of offshore wind, which for those outside energy is like 8 Kilroots or 8 Ballylumfords of offshore wind. We're way behind. Is there anything you can do to grab some low-hanging fruit? Because the beauty of some of this is it doesn't need government money. It just needs regulatory certainty.
Yeah, and again, that's the work that is necessary and that is going on. And I guess in respect of low-hanging fruit, if we want to look at it in that way, it's ensuring that there is a supply chain there and ready as well to help support the delivery of some of those key projects. So that's something, again, that the department is working with all various partners that you would expect us to be, in terms of ensuring that level of readiness is there to help support the delivery of some of these key areas of policy development and technology.
There's real potential in biomethane, and we know we already have the basic stock. It just needs to get moving, and there's all sorts of additional benefits if we get that into energy production. It might help Lough Neagh, for example, by diverting away from that. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think with biomethane, it is about that affordability piece. It's about helping ensure that we can get the technology off the ground, and that does require a level of support in the first instance. So we are working very closely with industry on that one. And I think it is fair to say that there have been really good relationships and partnerships garnered over recent years in terms of trying to deliver on our objectives in respect of energy.
No, that's good. Listen, I could bang on about energy all day, and I know David's looking at me here. So I just wish you well. I just wish you well. It's an enormous challenge, but it's good work.
David wants to bring it back to sport. Just very briefly, I've just one quick question. I thought just as we're talking, like the Department of Economy, it just covers so much, and we even in our conversation here, we've just scratched the surface of what your portfolio is. Do you think that maybe it's time to reconfigure the Northern Ireland departments again? Because whenever we reduce the departments down, it seemed to me that the Department of Economy has now become so big, and your responsibilities are so vast and so wide, that maybe it's time to rethink where responsibilities lie and maybe make the Department of Economy a bit more sleek in that way.
I think there's a number of our departments that are very vast, I suppose, in terms of their remits. Department for Communities is another. And yes, they are vast. But when I think about the Department for the Economy, it's very interlinked in terms of the policy responsibilities as well, in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And like people would sometimes ask about further and higher education, where it fits. And I think very much there is a real case to be made for why it sits within the Department for Economy in terms of its key role in terms of delivering the skills that are required to support businesses and to support the kind of economic development that we want to see. But yes, it is a vast department, and certainly it has been a steep learning curve for me in terms of getting up to speed with all of the policy areas over the past number of months. I was lucky enough to be the chair of the Economy Committee in the previous mandate, which has been a great help in that. But things do move quite a bit within a couple of years too. So, there has been a lot of progress, and it is also a great department to be responsible for, because you do see the benefit of the activity and the actions that are being taken. You get the opportunity to meet the people that are delivering it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Tim. Read my mind. That was going to be the question I was going to wrap up on, because they are. But that's true of all the departments about them being so fast. But that's another topic for another day. Caoimhe, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on Stormont Sources.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, guys, that was a pretty. I mean, one of the difficulties in actually interviewing someone like Caoimhe is that it's such a big department. Tim, you read my mind, the last question there. It's such a broad department. I mean, Tim, what did you make of, your golf question? I mean, were you convinced on that? You also pressed her a bit on higher education. So what did you make of your answers?
Yeah, we'll talk about tuition fees first, because I think it would be very easy to criticise her by saying, her answer was, well, the British government underinvestment. I think if it was a DUP person in the department and we had pressed that question of tuition fees, they would say exactly the same thing. A DUP minister would say, oh, well, the British government underfunding, underinvestment. And I think we've talked on this, and we've touched on this before, that the default position of all of our ministers, regardless of party, I think it's a little more stark when Sinn Féin ministers say it, but I think DUP ministers are guilty of this as well, is to simply point and say, well, we've had been underinvested in from the British government. The block grant is not high enough. They need to give us more money. That's how we're going to sort that out. Rather than take the difficult decision, the obvious decision, the decision that's going to have to be taken at some point in time, and raise tuition fees. Now, in other departments, that may well be in reducing water charges. In other departments, that may well be setting the regional rate and removing the cap on rates down the line. But at some point in time, these difficult fiscal decisions, which are unpopular, are going to have to be made.
But that point in time, Tim, will be after the 2027 election.
Of course.
They're going to do nothing before it of that nature, but they'll have to do it afterwards.
But is now not the time? But is now not the time? Because here's the thing, though. I was sitting thinking about this. I mean, because there is a thing about the cost of not making a decision, right? Quite often in Northern Ireland, and I think commentators, the media, we focus on the cost of a decision, but I don't think we focus enough on the cost of not taking a decision. So by not doing this, I mean, if I was Sinn Féin, I would have followed what the universities asked for. I thought the universities were trying to give political cover for Caoimhe to take that decision. And what I would frame it as, if I was Sinn Féin, I would frame it as an immigration and west of the ban economic development decision. I wouldn't frame it as, well, we're just going to raise fees. We're raising fees, sure, but that is to put more places in somewhere like McGee. That is to make sure that we have fewer of our younger people leaving. I would put it back to, I mean, obviously Sinn Féin in places like Boyle will be looking at the SDLP. I'd put it back to Colin Eastwood and I would say, well, this is funding X amount of extra places in McGee. Do you oppose that? Are we wrong to take that decision? Are we wrong to make these decisions west of the ban? I would put it back to their main rivals. And look, obviously you need to get the other executive parties to go along with you on that. But am I wrong on that?
I agree with you, and I agree. With what you both said. I think if you're going to take the decision now, and I do think they need to take these decisions sooner rather than later, the best way to do it is to make it a collective decision. And however you force that collective decision with a bit of political chicanery, where you take away the SDLP's opposition, or make it in the executive. And as you said, the universities wrote to the executive as a whole. They were giving political cover to everybody, saying this needs to be a collective decision, everybody coming together to give more funding to universities, to increase skills, to increase places, to keep people in Northern Ireland so that people aren't going down south, going off to England, Scotland and Wales to university. And they could have had cover to make that decision, and it's one I think they could have made before 2027, but they've kicked the can down the road.
No, I think there's also a responsibility on the universities. Suddenly they're running out of money. They're large, they've been growing year on year on year. They're big, bloated, financially wealthy organisations. They could do a lot more to help themselves.
David, are you going to defend the universities?
Well,
do you agree?
Big,
bloated,
university.
fat cats that lecture at the University of Ulster.
Well, it's not coming my way if that is the case. No, look. I mean, obviously the issues around higher education. I just think a more mature. I understand for students, and look, another part of this is that the cost of living help for students going to university. That is something for a lot of students now. It wasn't an issue when I was at university, or probably Tim or you, Michael, but it is an issue now for student rents are through the roof now. That is not something that when I was a student was even an issue, but it is an issue now. So that's the frustrating thing about these type of policy debates. When you hear people, whether it's the NUS-USI or you hear different sectors, everyone's got a point to a degree in some of the arguments they're making. And again, it's about, I suppose, for someone like Caoimhe, it's about how you balance that in society and the executive.
But tuition fees aren't like that, David. I mean, they're a tax on future earnings.
I'm just talking about the wider cost. I'm just talking about the wider cost of living support for students that we can give. I appreciate they are separate.
But tuition fees is the one you could raise because you don't pay those up front. I mean, that's just a massive misunderstanding, because people say working class people are debarred from university because of tuition fees.
£19,000, you start paying.
That's right.
And so Sinn Féin have made this calculation, they've made the political calculation. They're not going to do something that's going to be unpopular with young people. They do well with young voters. Also, across the border, they're totally opposed to increasing fees. And if they're going to achieve consistency across the island, then they have to. Daniel McCrossan gave the Sinn Féin minister a hard time over that.
And that's a bigger. I think Michael's really hit the nail on the head about Caoimhe, and Caoimhe referenced it in her answer there. She talked about we want to get rid of fees across the island of Ireland, and that is, I think, Michael's because how can Pierce Doherty say for the Atlantic University campus in Donegal, we need to make that free, but I suppose she's raising them in McGee.
So Sinn Féin have never said different things on both sides of the
border.
No,
I get it, but I'm not saying it's right, Tim. All I'm saying is that Look, at the end of the day, you're right, and Sinn Féin still takes 75%, yes, you heard that right, 75% of the Nationalist vote in recent elections. You're right. It doesn't, the Northern Nationalist electorate are firmly with them, and they've got a lot of credit to that. Michael, just want to go to your thing on energy, because you asked, again, I enjoyed the nerdiness of the questions on that, because it's a critical issue. What did you make of what she was saying about that? Because if we are going to hit net zero, and there's a lot of scepticism about, you raised it, about the targets that we're
net zero itself is almost an impossible dream, but it's not until 2050. So we don't have to worry about that right now. But 2030 is looming, and we've got, as Caoimhe said, we have legally binding targets, and we're nowhere near going to hit them. And we're halfway into the 2021 to 30 strategy. We're halfway into it, and the priorities they're still talking about is stakeholder consultation, policy development, consultation over designing a scheme, etc., etc. These things should have been up and running by now. We can't. Energy projects take a long time. On a good day, it's 3 or 4 years to get a wind farm up to do whatever. We've run out of time. We're not going to hit the 2030 targets. And I think the department really needs to put a rocket somewhere to get the department moving, because all the companies are looking to the department for leadership, and they're not asking for money. The crazy thing is they're not asking for money.
And it goes back to planning, Michael, and about speeding all that up and about getting all that done as well, which is another issue. So it was great having Caoimhe on the pod, not the first minister, but the first executive minister.
Our second marathon runner.
Our second marathon runner, our first Sinn Féin MLA as well. So hopefully this will be the start.
Just before we move on, we probably should touch on the golf a little bit, because I think there is a looming crisis. I think there's a looming crisis, because The RNA have indicated that they would be happy for
The
for the
RNA.
golf.
That's the Royal and Ancient who
The Royal
govern
and
golf.
Ancient. So the Royal and Ancient are the people who operate the Open Championship. For if that makes it easier to understand, and the RNA have said that they are happy for that championship to go to Portmarnock. Portmarnock is a beautiful golf course. It is a magnificent golf course just outside Dublin. Absolutely, if it was on the Open rotation, it would be one of the most challenging courses on the rotation. And the government down south have said they will back it financially. So if the RNA can make it work, they're going to back it. Now, the RNA did not come to Portrush for free. We paid. We paid for 3 turns of the Open. So we've had our first one in 2019. To be honest with you, I can't remember. I don't want to duck the question, and I can't remember. So I don't want to say the figure.
Is it a couple of 100,000 or is it?
Oh no!
It's millions.
Millions. I think, and I don't. The figure wasn't given publicly because it was commercially sensitive, and I think it was about 6 million. It was somewhere in and around that ballpark per turn.
I'm guessing the return on investment from that is it makes more than we spent.
Also, we paid another 25 million on top of that to do up Portrush, give grants to people to make accommodation and extra money for infrastructure that was needed for such a big thing to come to Northern Ireland. But in 2019 it was estimated it was about 100 million came back into the Northern Ireland economy, and we paid 31 million for this to come.
Okay.
100 million come back into the economy. This time it'll be about 150 million, they reckon, will come back into the economy. And of course, a lot of that groundwork's done. The station's already been upgraded. Now, here's the question: are we going to pay? And nobody is coming forward and saying, look, we're going to continue. We're in negotiations with the RNA to keep Portrush on the rotation, and we've got this pressure now from Portmarnock that is going to be bankrolled, and that 150 million, that 200 million could easily go 200 miles down the road to Portmarnock, and could easily play there because the course down there is a really good course, as is Portrush. It's a course like Portrush that would be at the higher end of the rotation.
They're links courses on the coastline, but if they ever want a good parkland course, they would do well to have a look at Lurgan.
Well, it'll not be the Open, it'll not be at Lurgan. But I mean, the other thing, and we did press on it a little bit, is it does feel to me like Tourism Northern Ireland's strategy now is maintenance. They're not bringing these big events anymore. They're not attracting. If you remember the Giro d'Italia being here, I mean, you probably don't like cycling, David. I don't.
That was
don't like
just
cycling.
a chance. I just remember it delayed the posters going up for the local and European elections.
And well, if you remember I don't know if you went out on the streets of Belfast when the cycling was going through. I mean, it was amazing. The place was buzzing. It was incredible.
This was just all during your time in the department, isn't it? That was all you did there. You just listed off, here's what I did and here's how I was so great in the department of Daddy, as it was then.
Neither the Open Championship or the Giro d'Italia were anything to do with me. I think I need to say very quickly, but my son was hugely disappointed at the Giro d'Italia because he thought it was called the Giro Battalion, and we turned up, he was quite young at the time, and he was crying. I said, why are you crying? He said, because he thought because of the Giro Battalion there's going to be people on bikes fighting each other, and because they all just cycled past, he thought it was terribly dull. But we did go to the Crashed Ice, which was another event, which was in the Stormont estate. It was huge, and it was people literally fighting each other on ice. It was an incredible night's entertainment. We just aren't getting those big tourist events anymore.
We need
Why
the
is
Ryder
that?
Cup. Never mind the Open. We need the Ryder Cup.
The Ryder. That's a serious call, Michael. Maybe we have the Ryder Cup at Royal County Down. I think that would be a really good bid.
Maybe Rory could swing it. Maybe Rory could swing it for us.
I mean, we have two of the greatest golf. If you look at and I don't think you appreciate this, David. If you look at Golf Digest, it's the American Golf Magazine's ranking of worldwide courses. Portrush and Royal County Down are always in the top 10.
Tim, look, I'm not. Look, Tim.
As is Portmarnock down south too.
My criteria is, and there are curmudgeons who say, well, don't spend any public money on anything. But if those figures are right, say we pay 20 million and we got 100 million back. Well, then that's plus 80 million. So I'm all for that. Same thing.
And you got to come down and watch the golf. You got to take up the offer of the minister.
I'm just not India, but I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't.
What's the festival?
I wouldn't crash anyone's party. But look. It's same. I'm glad Caoimhe mentioned the fact that the costs of not taking action. We've missed out on the Euros because casements not ready, and that's a real shame too. The things that we are missing out on, and we should be getting ahead of that thing. Okay, right. So another topic this week that I just want to get your quick thoughts on is, again, we are within 2 years of an assembly election. In 18 months, the campaign will be getting ready to go. These parties will be in election mode in 18 months' time. So, Lucid Talk with Belfast Telegraph produced a poll on Monday. It found some interesting changes. So, Sinn Féin still ahead, 26%. The DUP, Tim, on 18%. I'll get your thoughts on that. Not great news. Alliance on 13%, Ulster Unionist on 12%, TV on 12%, which is quite significant, SDLP on 11%, which isn't a bad result for them, Greens on 3%, Into on 2%, People for Profit on 1%, and Independents and others make up the following 2%. So I just want to ask this, Tim, since you are our resident former DP SPA, DP on 18%. I mean, that's within the margin of the last Assembly election where they got 21%, but it's showing there's no recovery here, Tim. Like, it's not,
Well, I think if you look at Lucid Talk polls, there is a pattern that the DUP and Sinn Féin do regularly fall in support between elections, and that then generally rallies a little bit. Now, last time, the DUP fell to about 17, 18. I think they might have even been 16%.
They were 13 and 1. That was 13 was the panic poll that
13 was the lowest they went to. Yeah. So, the DUP have always had this kind of baked in buffer zone in their vote. Now, and I think people didn't really appreciate this in the last Assembly election, because they were looking at opinion polls and thinking if the DUP dropped to 20% or 21%, this is going to be, a quarter of their seats gone. And people didn't actually realise that the DUP have a little bit of a baked in buffer there. They can go down probably a little bit further than where they were at the last election, and they're still pretty much okay. But they can't go down much further. A drop of 21% to 18% actually would be a number of seats that would be lost, and who they would be lost to. Probably TUV would gain some, probably the Alliance would gain some.
And just quickly, the TUV on 12%. Now, for any other party, that would mean at least an executive spot for them. They would have at least 9 seats easily on that. But because it's the TUV, let's not forget, TV got nearly 8% of the vote and only still came back with 1 seat. Transfers are their killer. So,
if the TUV moves to 12 and the DUP goes to 18, that takes away that little bit of baked-in advantage to the DUP, and that transfers the TUV, and I think pushes them over the top in 4 or 5, maybe 6 seats. Now, their 12% will not translate into 15, 16 seats the way it would do for the Alliance Party, but they will take 3 or 4 from the DUP and return maybe 5, 6 seats. But they won't get enough to be an executive position. You'd need the DUP to come down to about that 15% and the TUV to come up to over 12% to get that.
Michael, obviously, look, we had Claire Hanna on the pod last week. The SDLP now, again, this has been since she has taken over as leader. They're now back above 10% now pretty consistently. They had dropped down to 6 in some polls. They're now up at about 11. So she'll be happy with that, considering being within 2 points of the Alliance Party.
Yeah, I think so. I think overall it just shows that she's steadied the ship and has maybe pushed things up a bit. But I don't put too much stock in this poll. The DUP are down, Sinn Féin are down. This is a reflection, I think, of hardline unionists saying to the DUP, we still haven't quite forgiven you. And then a general thing in the public that the executive's doing PR but not really doing a terrible lot else. So the parties at the heart of the executive have taken a wee bit of a knock. I think come the election, they'll rally their troops, there'll be a ding-dong row about a parade or something, and everyone will fall into line. The DUP will be back well in above 20% into the 20s. Sinn Féin will be up towards 30, and it'll be business as usual. That's the way it's likely to go. The one thing that jumped out at me from that poll was when I compared it to June 24, the same poll, the combined vote of the SDLP, Sinn Féin and the Alliance Party in this poll is 50%. But I noticed that in June 2024, the combined vote of the Sinn Féin, the SDLP and Alliance was 60%. And that's before you even add People Before Profit or Green or Into. And it's 60% plus for that lot. You're into Secretary of State. Take a look at this poll, please. Territory.
So you're saying the Alliance Party are a nationalist party? Goodness.
You're
like going into Jamie Bryson mode here.
Well, take half of it. But it's saying that the unionist vote is kind of being outnumbered 2-1, which I never thought would happen.
Well, I think look, traditionally in these polls, in these midterm polls, the DUP and Sinn Féin both rally back. I would expect if there's an assembly election called in the next week, and certainly by 2027, when the poll happens, the DUP, if the conditions, if there's nothing changes than what the conditions are right now, the DUP will be back up to 22%, maybe a little higher. The TUV will be back to 8%, 7%, and Sinn Féin will be back to mostly the percentage they got last time. So I don't expect much to change. And this poll isn't a panic poll. This isn't a nuclear button to be pressed for anybody. This is just the regular midterm poll that we would think is likely. And let's see what this time next year says, and then we can maybe get into panic.
And worth remembering that, you know, the difference between this one and that, I think was the March 21 poll that helped push against Arlene Foster, was we were a year away from an assembly election, so if the DUP were going to move, they were going to have to do it roundabout within the next few months. Okay, folks.
Well, if the DUP got 13% of the vote, I mean, you know, they've lost 2/3 of their MLAs. You know, so.
Well, I think on this poll, Gavin is perfectly safe.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much for your insights again, gents, for this week. That's all we have time for this edition of Stormont Sources. Thank you for listening in. Please keep in touch with all your ideas, questions and comments. That's all from Tim, Michael and myself. We'll see you next week.